Welcome, friend. Before we begin, just picture this. A remote military training world called Vargan Reach, all red crystal canyons and harsh wind, built to test discipline under pressure. Our story follows one man, Darian Voss, a maintenance contractor who arrives for what should be a routine check. But small details start to feel wrong in a way you cannot unsee. And once the first warning hits, the only question becomes, who is this exercise really for? And who is it really meant to silence? Take a breath, settle in, and let the signal carry you. Vargan Reach was a training world, not a moon, and that mattered the first minute Darian Voss stepped onto the redstone. The gravity was light enough to make a bad jump feel lucky, and heavy enough to break an ankle when luck ran out. Heat rolled across the landing shelf in slow waves, carrying the dry metal smell of solar towers and a sharper bite of cut crystal dust from the canyons below. Darian kept his shoulders low as he crossed the service pad, one gray tool case in his right hand and a coil of calibration cable over his left arm. On paper, he was a terrain simulation maintenance contractor assigned to Astravale War Academy for a routine systems check before a senior survival exercise. In practice, he had been sent because someone in the academy chain had requested a technician who did not panic under field variance. He had learned a long time ago that people only used words like that after someone already had. Ahead of him, a line of cadets in dark training gear stood under a segmented shade frame while a briefing officer spoke over a portable speaker. They looked disciplined from a distance, but up close Darian saw the tells that mattered more than posture. One cadet kept flexing her right hand as if old damage lived in the wrist, while another kept checking the sky instead of the route markers. A tall cadet near the back watched the officer's mouth and not the map, which meant he expected lies. The woman in the center of the line was still, and that stillness was its own kind of signal. Her name patch read Izira Tal. She stood with the quiet economy of someone who did not waste movement when eyes were on her. She was not trying to impress, and she was not trying to hide. Darian marked her and kept walking. A junior operations runner met him at the base of the control mast and held out a slate. "You were late by 6 minutes, contractor." Darian scanned the slate without taking it. "The crosswind delayed your pad queue." The runner frowned. There was no crosswind advisory. Darian looked at the mast vane above them. It ticked twice, then shivered against the locked bearing. "There is now." He moved past the runner before the boy could answer, then climbed the service rungs to the lower panel housing. The lock accepted his temporary credentials, then lagged longer than it should before opening. Inside, the diagnostic board glowed soft green. Everything looked clean at first glance, and that was the problem. It looked too clean. Darian set down the case, clipped in his cable, and ran a local route check on the canyon phase array. The map bloom rose in front of him as a wireframe of the training zone. Red crystal walls, wind channels, safe lanes, remote barriers, and habitat shelters resolved into a familiar grid. Route 3 flickered. It was not an alarm or a hard break, only a tiny offset in return timing, less than a second, and then it was gone. Darian ran it again. The offset appeared in a different segment of Route 3 and vanished before the board logged it. Someone had inserted a moving delay. It was not enough to fail a system test, but it was enough to desync a route lock if the sequence shifted at the wrong moment. Below, the briefing officer's voice sharpened as the speaker volume rose for final instructions. Darian closed the board and looked down through the slats. The cadets began moving toward the gate line in squads of 5. Izira Tal turned once toward the canyon mouth, as if listening for something beyond the officer's script. Darian checked the wind vane again. It shivered in short, uneven pulses, and the heat gusts were changing direction too fast for this hour. He descended the rungs, clipped the cable back into his case, and intercepted the gate marshal. "Route 3 has a timing drift. Hold the exercise 10 minutes. The marshal barely looked at him. "The command window is fixed." "Then move them to Route 2. Command signed Route 3. Darian studied the man's. Rank strip. A gate marshal held local authority over gates, not schedules, not director-level decisions. "Who signed it?" Darian asked. The marshal's jaw tightened. Director Nairakesh. Operations. That was too high for a routine cadet run. Darian watched the first squad approach the canyon entry and felt his breath catch for one tight beat. Small wrong things were clustering, and clustering meant intention. High-level sign-off on a routine run, a timing drift that refused to sit still, crosswind behavior outside forecast, and a canyon entry selected anyway. The first squad crossed the threshold marker. A low tone rolled over the pad as the range system declared the exercise live, and the outer barriers came up in pale blue light. The speaker shifted from briefing mode to range control. Senior evaluation cycle begins now. Cadet units proceed to assign shelters and await second phase stimulus. Darian heard the wording and went still. That phrase belonged to predator response drills, not terrain endurance. Iziratal was in the second squad, entering Route 3. Darian stepped toward the marshal again. Pull them back. The marshal snapped. You are not in the chain. Darian turned before the sentence ended and ran for the service conduit line that paralleled the canyon. He did not waste breath arguing with men who would quote procedure while a trap closed. The conduit route was narrow, half open to the heat, and lined with old sensor pylons. Darian dropped to one knee at the first access node, jacked in, and forced a mirror feed from the canyon cameras. The screen stuttered, then showed 3 cadet squads advancing between red crystal walls that rose like broken glass frozen in a storm. Route beacons flashed white ahead of them. Then 2 beacons on the left wall went dark. The camera feed glitched and returned with the route marker positions shifted several meters inward. Darian swore under his breath and pulled up barrier status. The system showed containment locks, and every manual path he tried snapped back with a denial tagged at director authority. A second tone rolled across the range, lower and longer, and it did not belong to any cadet drill package he had ever seen. The rear corridor camera caught movement in the dust behind the third squad. For shapes low to the ground, fast, and wrong in a way drones never were. Live predators. Darian was moving. Before the thought finished, he clipped the cable, grabbed the case, and sprinted down the conduit toward the emergency ladder drop into Route 3. Heat surged through the open grate as he kicked the ladder hatch and slid the last third of the way down. Crystal dust scratched his gloves. The canyon amplified every sound into hard, clean edges. Cadets ahead were turning in confusion, trying to identify the source of the low growling echo that bounced from wall to wall. The predators came in a blur of pale muscle and segmented forelimbs, each the size of a field bike, jaws shielded by bone ridges built to cut through local crystal scrub. They had no place inside a marked cadet route. Darian hit the deck, yanked a flare canister from his case, and rolled it under the lead animal. It burst white and screaming hot. The thing swerved on instinct and slammed into the canyon wall. Left wall move now, Darian shouted. The nearest cadets stared at him, shocked to hear a maintenance contractor giving combat direction. Move, he roared. Izira moved first. She grabbed the sleeve of the cadet beside her and drove him toward the wall seam where the crystal shelves formed a narrow ledge. The others followed because someone had moved and because the predator was now close enough to make disbelief expensive. Darian slammed a second flare against the ground and threw his tool case hard into the path of the second animal. It snapped on the case, teeth punching through alloy, and bought the cadets 3 seconds. 3 seconds was enough to keep a group alive if they used them. Izira looked back once. Their eyes met as she saw what mattered. He was not improvising from fear. He was buying angles. Climb the ledge, Darian said. Not the route center. The sound is lying to you. Her expression changed by 1 degree, attention sharpening. What are they? She asked. Alive. That is the only part that matters right now. A shot cracked above the canyon. It was not a stun pulse, but a kinetic suppression round fired high to scatter and steer. Darian looked up and saw black armor silhouettes moving across the upper rim catwalks. Academy enforcement was already positioned, too early for a response team and too well placed for surprise. To Darian, it meant the same thing as the drifting. Route timing. This had been staged. The range speaker kicked on, clearer now, through hidden canyon emitters. Cadet units maintain route discipline. Emergency wildlife incursion is under control. Proceed to designated extraction corridor. Darien checked the nearest beacon line and felt cold under the heat. The lit corridor led deeper into a narrowing basin with no side exits and poor vertical cover. A kill funnel. Izira heard it in his silence. That route is wrong, she said. Darien gave her a short look. Yes. A tall cadet with a precise stance stepped beside her. Darien had noticed him at the briefing, and the name patch read Tolan RHY. Range command has authority. You do not, Tolan said. A third predator burst from the dust behind them and launched at the rear pair. Darien did not argue. He hit the release on a maintenance bolt gun from his belt and drove a magnetic line spike into the wall above the animal's shoulder. The line snapped taut, dragging its leap sideways just enough for it to strike Crystal and tumble. Izira kicked one rear cadet up onto the ledge while Darien hauled the line free. Darien looked at Tolan. You can follow command and die correctly. Or you can help me keep them alive. For 1 second, Tolan held on to doctrine. Then he saw the enforcement team on the rim fire another suppressive burst. Not at predators, but at the cadet's likely escape line. His face drained his certainty. Darien pointed ahead to a slanted seam where the red crystal wall split around a weather-cut fracture. That cut takes us to a maintenance trench, Darien said. Narrow and ugly, but out of the funnel. We go now. The canyon speaker came alive again, and this time the voice was not the automated range system. It was a man, calm and crisp, used to being obeyed. This is Commander Selvek. All cadets are ordered to remain on marked routes for emergency retrieval. Any interference by unauthorized personnel will be treated as sabotage. Darien heard two things under the tone. Selvek had moved to live command fast, which meant he was already positioned for it, and he framed Darien as sabotage before asking a single question. Izira glanced at Darien. They're naming you before they know what happened. They know what happened, Darien said. He fired one more flare down, the official route, drawing the predators toward the bright path, then signaled the cadets toward the crystal cut. Single line, Darien said. Hands on the person in front when the wind rises. If the sound tells you to turn, ignore it unless I say. Kev Oren, broad-shouldered and breathing hard, but steady, moved to the rear without being told. Mira's son slid near the front, eyes tracking wall grain like she could read terrain from color shifts, while Varek No, youngest and shaking, tried to hide both. Darien took point. Behind them, the canyon speakers repeated the false extraction order. Ahead, the crystal seemed narrowed into shadow, and the heat changed from open gusts to trapped breaths rising from stone. By the time suppressive rounds struck the lip above their new path, everyone in the line understood the same thing. This was no fail drill. This was a hunt. The maintenance trench was barely wide enough for two shoulders, and the crystal bent sound until direction stopped meaning anything. Darien made them watch the dust instead of the echoes, and he kept them moving while suppressive fire cut the rim above. Darien crouched at the next conduit panel, pried the cover with the broken edge of his ruined tool case, and found a service map printed on old alloy. Most of it was scratched away, but one line remained, and he traced it twice to be sure. A status field on the panel labeled it as a drain line leading to a weather sink. To Darien, that read as a coin toss between cover and a dead pit. Izira knelt beside him, voice low. If they're driving us, they will expect shelter choices. They already do, Darien said. Then we need a choice they cannot predict. Darien looked at her then, not just posture and timing, but judgment under pressure. You are not a line cadet, he said. She gave the smallest hint of a humorless smile. I am whatever they need me to be this week. That was not an answer. It was enough for now. Darien pointed to Kev. Rear security. If something comes in close, do not chase it. He pointed to Mira. You are on wall reads. Call false turns. He looked at Tolan. You know Academy route doctrine. Tell me where Selvek will place intercept teams if he thinks we are heading to standard. Shelter. Tolan hesitated, the old reflex to protect chain authority fighting the new evidence in front of him. Then he drew a route grid in the dust with one finger. 3 options for this sector, Toland said. North shelter, ridge ladder, or weather sink. Doctrine blocks the obvious 2 and leaves 1 open to feel like luck. The sink, Izira said. Toland nodded, ashamed. Yes. Darian erased the drawing with his boot. Then we do not go to the sink. We pass over the line and cut under the turbine anchors. Kev stared at him. That route is maintenance only. Half collapsed. That is why they may not watch it first, Darian said. Varric's voice shook. May not. May not is better than kill funnel, Darian said. The trench widened into a split where the crystal walls leaned apart over an old turbine base. Heat hissed from vents in the stone and made the air shimmer, and Darian stopped at the edge to study dust and tread. Most feet would take the left descent to the weather sink. The ground there had cleaner tread, and that cleanliness was the loudest warning. Darian dropped to the right, sliding under a cracked support beam into a slot barely high enough to crawl. Izira followed without argument, and the others came after, one by one, breathing louder in tight heat. Boots pounded across the left descent less than a minute later. Selvek's people had guessed the obvious route exactly as Darian expected. The slot opened into a low mechanical crawl space threaded with dead pipes and sensor lines. The air was hotter here, but there was shade and no direct line of sight from the ridge. Darian motioned them deeper and killed the small light on his wrist. For the first time since the predators hit, they had a pocket of stillness. It was not safety. It was only stillness. Varric leaned against a pipe, eyes wide. Why would Academy enforcement herd cadets into a trap? No one answered at first. Toland did eventually, and the words sounded like they hurt. They would not. Izira turned to him. They already did. Then it is not Academy, Toland said, trying to rebuild a world that made sense. It is a local command error. A criminal interference. A hack. Darian opened the service panel nearest him and checked line telemetry. The channel was alive, but filtered. Through command priority blocks, he could not clear from here. He spoke without looking up. Predators were placed along a controlled route. The barriers were locked under director authority. Suppression fire started before any emergency declaration. And Selvek named me saboteur before anyone took witness statements. Darian closed the panel. His jaw tightened until the words sat clean. This is not a local error. The words sat in the crawl space like heat. Izira looked at Toland, then at Darian. If this was planned for what? Darian started to answer, then heard it. A faint rotating hum through the pipe wall. Drone rotors, close. Darian put a hand up, and every voice stopped. The hum split into 2 directions because of crystal overhead, then settled into one true line when floor dust trembled near a vent grate. Small pursuit drones, Mira whispered. Thermal scan type. Darian nodded. They will see body heat if they get a line through the vent grid. He scanned the crawl space and found an old coolant line, dry, with a pressure valve housing that still had a manual release. He moved to it and tested the wheel. Stuck. Kev braced beside him without being asked and turned with him, and the wheel gave a sharp crack as it rotated. A pocket of trapped mineral dust blasted through the vent network in a gray plume. Above them, rotor hum spiked, then coughed. The drones had lost their thermal red in the dust cloud. Darian let the wheel spin back and looked at Kev. Nice timing. Kev almost smiled despite fear. That was not timing. That was panic with muscles. Darian's mouth moved one fraction. Useful panic. A new voice hit the local speaker line then, routed through maintenance conduits. Female, controlled, and sharper than Selvek's blunt pressure. Cadets of Astra Vale. This is Director Nirakesh. Commander Drawn is securing the range from a systems compromise caused by an unauthorized contractor. If you surrender at the nearest beacon, your evaluations will continue under protected conditions. Darian looked at the conduit speaker grill and said nothing. Naira continued, and her tone adjusted as if she were selecting a tool. The individual calling himself Darian Voss has tampered with route arrays and released wildlife assets. He is attempting to frame range command to hide his sabotage. Naira's voice narrowed onto a specific name. Cadet Iziratau, if you are hearing this, your cooperation will be noted in the succession review. Izira's face went flat. To Darian, that sentence tied the hunt to a political lever, clean and direct. Tola heard it too. His eyes shifted toward her. Succession review? He asked quietly. Izira held his gaze. I told you there was a vote. You did not say your cohort challenged command appointments, Tolan said. I did not know command would try to kill us over it, Izira said. Naira's voice returned, softer now, designed to sound reasonable. Cadets, remain calm. Predator response assets are constrained to route sectors. Any movement into maintenance zones increases risk. Stay in place and identify yourselves. Darian leaned toward the speaker and cut the line with a pry tool. The voice died, and the sudden quiet made everyone listen to their own breathing. Darian turned to the group. We move in 1 minute. Drones will adapt. Tolan still looked at Izira, as if seeing a hidden map behind her face. What is this vote really about? Izira answered fast, because time was short and lives would cost more now. The Academy Command Board chooses a field regent liaison for the war colleges. Our cohort petitioned to block Regent Halden Vair's appointment after casualty reviews were altered. We thought they would bury us in procedure, not bury us here. Darian held still. Regent Halden Vair was not Academy internal politics alone, and that made the scale worse. Varek whispered, They are killing cadets over a vote. No, Darian said. They're killing witnesses and calling it a failed drill. The silence after that had shape. Darian tapped a pipeline and pointed down the crawl space. There's a supply station ahead, Darian said. If it is untouched, we get water, med wraps, and maybe a line out. If it is watched, we learn how tight the net is. Mira brushed red grit from her cheek. How far? 20 minutes if the trench holds, Darian said. Kev looked toward the dark passage. And if it does not? Darian shouldered the broken case and started forward. Then we stopped pretending this is a survival test and start acting like a breakout. The supply station sat in a hollow under an overhanging crystal shelf, built low against wind and heat with 2 service doors and a roof buried under stone mesh. Darian saw the place before the others. Did because he was looking for what had not fit. No dust on the threshold, no sun bleaching on the lock plate, and a cable line that had been moved and put back. He held the group behind a split ridge and watched for a full count of 20 breaths. No visible guards, which meant sensors, a remote camera, or a patient team beyond sight. Darian pointed to Mira and traced a small arc toward the left wall. She nodded and moved wide, hugging crystal shade. Izira took the opposite side. Kev stayed with Varek and Tolan in rear cover. Darian approached the door head-on, heavy footsteps and visible profile, making himself look like a tired contractor with a broken case and no plan. The camera above the lintel twitched. There, he stumbled on purpose and let the case crash, then dropped to one knee under the camera blind angle. His hand slid inside the lower seam and found a filament sensor line attached to a trigger puck. Not explosive. Signal trip. He clipped it, reversed the feed loop with a bridge pin, and counted to 3 in his head. A side panel on the station roof hissed open and a compact drone rose, searching for the trip event that now appeared unchanged. Izira was already in position. She launched a shard hook line from the wall edge and snapped the drone sideways into crystal. It dropped in sparks without a sound louder than a broken dish. Darian glanced at her and saw the same thing again, not parade skill, but field adaptation. He opened the door. The station interior was dim, cool by local standards, and half-stripped. Water packs were gone from the front rack. Med kit shelves were looted, and a portable comm relay was missing. Left behind on purpose, just enough to make desperate cadets enter and linger while waiting for a non-existent extraction. Darian felt Selvek's hand in the direct hunt, and Naira's hand in the environment design. 2 layers, clean. Inside for 2 minutes, Darian said. No more. Kev dragged the damaged door half shut while Tolan and Varek searched the rear bins. Mira moved straight to the wall map and began reading old maintenance codes, while Izira checked the station console. Is still linked to local range, Izira said. Read only. Darian joined her and bypassed the user screen to the service submenu. Most channels were sealed behind command encryption, but one field remained visible. Asset density by sector. He scrolled and stopped. The predator icons were not random, but arranged in arcs around cadet route nodes, with dynamic shifts tied to movement probability scores. Izira saw his expression. What is it? Darian kept the explanation short. They are not only hunting. They are measuring. Route choices, panic splits, who follows orders, who breaks. Tolan turned from the shelf search. For training analysis? Darian looked at him. For selection. Varric found a sealed compartment under a bench and called out. Inside were 6 emergency water bladders, 2 heat veils, compression wraps, and an old signal spool, hidden on purpose, not missed. Darian gave one nod. Good. Kev handed a water bladder to Varric first, then to the others without waiting for permission. Izira tore a compression wrap for a cut along Myra's forearm, and the moment was brief, practical, and human. Then the station speaker clicked on. Commander Selvek drawn again, closer this time, likely routed through the station itself. You are improving, contractor. Most cadets run to the sink. You cut under the anchors. Darian met Izira's eyes, and they both understood the point. To Darian, it sounded like Selvek wanted them to know he was watching, and wanted them to feel watched. Selvek continued. You have also entered a flag support station. That means you need water and a line out. Good. Need makes people simple. Darian muted the speaker, and Selvek's voice kept moving under his hand until the line died. Kev looked at the wall. He talks a lot for someone trying to catch us. He talks when he thinks he is ahead, Darian said. That is useful. Mira lifted a small data wafer from beneath the map board. This was taped under the panel. Darian took it. No label, no Academy mark, and the concealment felt personal, like a technician who expected a search. He inserted it into the service port. The screen showed a short approval trail in plain words, with asset transfer approved. Predator release moved to director override. The evaluation shifted to variable survival response, and observer access granted to the Regent Liaison Office. Darian felt his stomach drop, not from fear, but from how neatly it fit. Izira leaned in and read the last line twice. Regent Liaison Office, she said quietly. Tolan stood very still. Halden Vare. An alert chirped on the console. Darian snapped the wafer free and killed the display. What? Izira asked. Izira checked the motion panel. Outer movement. Multiple units. Fust. Selvek had let them sit just long enough to drink and hope. Then he closed the hand. Darian handed Kev the second heat veil. Rear exit. Now. There is no rear exit, Tolan said. Mira was already at the map wall. There is a maintenance hatch behind coolant racks. Darian pulled the racks forward with Kev and found the hatch plate welded at one corner. Izira set her shoulder under the lip while Darian drove the bolt gun wedge into the weld seam, and Kev hauled until the plate tore free with a scream of metal. The first suppression round struck the front door. They were not fired to kill, but to keep the group moving where Selvek wanted. Darian pointed into the hatch tunnel. Mira lead. Wall reads. Izira next. Varric center. Tolan with him. Kev rear with me. Varric looked at the dark shaft, and then back at the door buckling under impacts. I cannot see anything. Darian shoved a cold light strip into his hand. Good. Light makes a target. Keep it low. The front speaker came alive one last time as they dropped into the hatch. Director Naira Kesh now. Voice smooth and almost disappointed. Darian Voss. You are forcing cadets deeper into an unstable weather sector. This will be included in the record. Darian looked up toward the speaker grill as Kev sealed the hatch behind them with the torn plate. If there is a record left, he said. Then Darian turned and crawled into the dark, carrying the wafer with the first real proof that the Academy had never planned to bring all of them back. Minutes later, the tunnel opened under old turbine foundations and spilled them out through a battered service hatch into a scar basin where red crystal gave way to black stone streaked with metallic salt. Heat pooled low here and the air tasted bitter, and above them wind sang through canyon teeth and made direction feel uncertain again. Mira crouched and touched the ground. Surface changed. Slick if the heat spikes. Darian scanned ridgelines and saw no direct lights and no obvious pursuit shapes. That was worse than visible teams because it suggested Selvek had shifted from pressure to patience. They moved along the basin edge in a staggered line with Darian and Izira alternating point when the terrain narrowed. Tolan stayed near Varek, not from command reflex anymore, but because the younger cadet was close to shaking apart. Kev drifted rear and flank as needed, solid in the way some people became when fear finally chose a job. The light fell away behind ridge teeth, and every long shadow looked like movement, and every echo felt like a lie. A pursuit drone skimmed low. Mira yanked Varek down before he stepped into open fire. This time the pursuit was closer and trying to split the line. Darian pulled everyone behind a broken rock rise and counted muzzle flashes. 2 teams, one left and one right, advancing staggered and not rushing. Darian read it as Selvek trying to buy fatigue and mistakes instead of a quick end. Izira appeared over rock, then ducked as shots cracked stone chips across her sleeve. He is boxing us toward the lower channel. Darian checked the basin floor and saw the lower channel by faint glow. It was a narrow run between black stone walls, likely easier to track and easier to trap. "You want speed there," Darian said. "Too clean." Tolan pointed to old weather poles half buried along the basin rim. "Those poles mark an observation path. If one is still linked, it could reach the upper relay." "Could," Kev said. Tolan's mouth tightened. "This sector was decommissioned before my class." Darian made the call. Mira and Varek with Kev hugged the low rocks and moved 30 meters on my mark. Slow enough to look scared. Varek stared at him. "Look scared." Darian kept his voice flat. "Can you do that?" The boy gave him a stunned look. "Yes." "Good," Darian said. Selvek pushes what looks weak. Darian turned to Izira and Tolan. "You two with me to the weather poles. If we can pull a local beacon burst, we make him think we are breaking for the lower channel." Izira understood first. "Make him commit?" Darian nodded. "Then hit where he is not." The plan was ugly and simple, which made it right for a bad hour like this. Kev moved with Mira and Varek exactly as told, visible enough to bait, but not reckless. Suppression fire shifted toward them almost at once. Selvek had the same instinct Darian predicted. Darian, Izura, and Tolan cut up the rim through a seam in the rock and reached the nearest weather pole under fire noise and echo chaos. The pole was old but intact, and Tolan ripped the panel and cursed. "Power cell is dead." Darian dropped to the base housing and found a manual charge line used for maintenance testing. It was the wrong fit for his cable, so he stripped the end with his knife, twisted the contacts, and fed power from the emergency crank unit on his harness. Tolan stared. "That should not work." "It does not need to work long," Darian said. The pole stuttered to life and dumped a burst marker into the local range mesh. On the basin floor, 3 dormant route beacons flashed white in sequence toward the lower channel. A path and a false one. Selvek's left team surged to cut it off. Darian saw their movement by muzzle flashes shifting too fast and too far at once. "Now," he said. He sent a flare into the lower channel, making the bait look desperate and obvious, then dropped from the rim with Izira and Tolan to rejoin Kev's group through a side cut hidden by crystal shards. For 10 seconds the basin was a storm of echoes. Selvek's teams fired on the flare path, drones dove the wrong corridor, and predators shrieked where no one was. Darian's group slipped along ridge shadow opposite the channel and crossed into a collapsed sensor corridor that led toward higher ground. They had not escaped, but they had taken one piece of the hunt away from Selvek. Prediction. When they finally reached a pocket of cover under a leaning crystal arch, everyone was breathing hard enough to shake. Varek laughed once, sharp and unbelieving. "I thought you said move slow?" Darian checked the ridge behind them. "You moved slow." They moved fast. Kev wiped grit from his face. "Almost missed simple drills." Izira looked at Darian in red reflected light. How many times can we do that before they stop believing us? Darian pulled out the wafer and looked at the dark ridge line where academy teams hunted their own cadets. Not many, he said. So the next time, we stop running only to survive. We run to take something. A short time later, they pushed deeper along broken ground where the basin gave way to vent rock and half-buried infrastructure. Mira kept pausing at odd angles, studying stone the way she studied dust. Then she stopped and pointed. That wall cut is too straight. Darian saw it when she named it. Red crystal walls gave way to black vent rock in a half circle. But one section held straight cuts under dust, too regular to be natural. A buried access wall, decommissioned or hidden. He and Kev dug with pry bars and broken panel plates until they exposed a hatch ring. The lock had no power, but the manual will still turned after Kev put his shoulder into it. Hot stale air rushed out from below. The descent shaft led to a small coordination room, half-burned, likely from an old fault or a hurried purge. Consoles were melted on one side and intact on the other, and the room smelled of carbon, dust, and old insulation. Darian closed the hatch above them and set Kev to watch while the others searched. Tolan looked around, voice tight. This was not on standard route maps. That is why it might still have something, Darian said. I-0 brushed soot off a wall panel and found a backup data rack recessed behind fire shielding. This one is sealed. Darian joined her, checked the physical latch, and felt a small relief. The fire had cut power before remote wipe routines could complete, and the manual release still worked. Inside were 4 data cartridges. 2 were cracked by heat. 1 was a blank training archive, and 1 was labeled only with a date code and local sector identifier. He inserted the last one into a surviving console port powered by his emergency crank cell. The file opened in fragments, but it was enough. The hub logs described a revised range package that switched the event into variable survival response mode, flagged cadet groups by cohort affiliation, and routed behavior markers to an external observer office. The markers themselves were blunt and cold. Compliance under stress. Peer loyalty under resource loss. Command obedience after contradictory orders. Leadership emergence under casualty probability. Varric read over Darian's shoulder and went pale. They turned us into a study. Tolan's jaw clenched. No, worse. A culling model. I-0's voice stayed steady, but Darian heard strain under it. They sorted by cohort affiliation. They chose who entered which route. Darian scrolled farther and found an authorization fragment that survived the burn. It was stripped in places, but the chain names still showed through. Director Operations, Nirakesh. Field Enforcement Commander Selvek drawn. Observer Liaison Office attached to Regent Haldenvare. No ambiguity left. Tolan took a step back from the console, like it might burn him. I trained for command under these people. Kev answered from the hatch, eyes on the shaft. Then train faster. Mira looked at Darian. Can we send it? Not from here, Darian said. This hub is local only. I-0 crossed her arms, thinking through implications with visible discipline. If this reaches the board before the vote, Vare loses the appointment. Darian shook his head. If this reaches anyone before we get out, they accelerate cleanup and call a forge by a saboteur. Tolan stared at the charred room, the evidence, and the cadets around him. That is exactly what they are already doing. Yes, Darian said, and they still need bodies or survivors arranged in a story. We use that. An impact slammed the hatch above. Everyone froze. A second impact followed, controlled, and Darian recognized a breaching tool rhythm. Selvek had tracked them again. Kev slid into position by the shaft wall, ready to strike whatever came through first. Darian looked around the room for exits and found a half-collapsed vent tunnel low behind burn consoles. It was too narrow for clean movement. It was better than death. Darian copied key files to the wafer and 1 spare cartridge, then yanked the console cable free and let sparks jump. The room fell dim. I-0 saw where he looked and moved to the vent without waiting. This is a choke point. Good, Darian said. We need one. The hatch will screamed overhead. Selvek's voice came down the shaft before the panel opened, amplified through a portable horn. Cadets, This is the last lawful order you will receive today. Exit the hub one at a time. Weapons down. Hands visible. The contractor is not to be harmed if compliant. Kev snorted once. Darian looked up at the hatch and spoke evenly. You are offering arrest in a buried hub after live predator release. Selvek answered immediately, not defensive, almost conversational. You are alive because I allowed pressure, not termination. Do not confuse the two. Darian filed the belief as a weakness. The hatch burst inward in a flash unit. Rolled down the shaft. Darian kicked it under a burnt console and threw himself behind the rack as white light punched the room. Kev slammed the first enforcement trooper in the legs as he dropped and drove him into the shaft wall. Izira grabbed Varek by the collar and pulled him into the vent mouth. Mira and Tolan followed her, hands scraping metal as they shoved through. Selvek's teams came in disciplined pairs, using the shaft as hard cover, trying to pin rather than rush. Darian read that as intent to capture, not kill. Darian fired his bolt gun line into a hanging fan assembly and yanked. The dead fan tore loose and dropped across the shaft opening, tangling the next pair for one crucial second. Kev, Von. Darian shouted. Kev backed into the vent mouth, took one hit on his shoulder armor from stun round, and kept moving. Darian covered the rear, firing flares and line spikes to ruin sight lines in the cramped hub. Heat and smoke turned the room into a blind furnace. Selvek's people had numbers, and Darian had seconds. He slid into the vent last and kicked the cracked grill back into place. Rounds punched through thin duct metal behind him, but the angle was wrong, and that wrong angle was everything. After a hard climb through scraping duct and loose braces, the vent tunnel angled up and spilled them out behind a shattered wind fence on upper ridges. Early light cut across red crystal and turned every edge bright enough to hurt. Below, the coordination hub hatch spewed smoke and enforcement teams spread into the basin. They had proof now, and they also had no safe route, no long-range comm line, and a commander who was learning from every escape. Darian checked Kev's shoulder. The stun hit had burned a groove through outer plating and numbed the arm, but it had not driven deep. Can you use it? Darian asked. Kev flexed once and winced. Enough to hit someone I dislike. Useful, Darian said. Mira pointed east where ridgeline rose toward a line of weather towers and a distant glint above them. Signal mast. Tolan squinted. That is not a mast. That is the old ceremony broadcast platform for field evaluations. Izira turned to him, still linked to the Academy network. Tolan hesitated, then nodded slowly. It should be. It was built to transmit live assessment feeds to board observers. Darian looked from the platform to enforcement teams forming below. It was not just an escape path, but a way to force truth into the same system now being used to bury it. Selvek's voice came over the open range speaker network, sharper now. All units tighten grid. Priority on Tal and Voss. Others are secondary. Izira heard it and her expression changed, not to fear, but to certainty. They're no longer hiding the target set. Darian slid the copied cartridge into her hand. Then we stop acting like targets, he said. We move for the platform. By the time they reached the approach ridges, the climb had already carved its price into their breathing. The maintenance path was old stone poured into the mountainside decades ago and cracked by heat cycles until sections hung loose over drops lined with crystal spears. Wind hit from alternating directions, broken and thrown by canyon walls, and every step needed a decision. Darian put Mira on terrain calls and Tolan on Academy infrastructure memory. Izira handled pace control with the group when Darian moved ahead to scout, and Kev stayed rear and center at once, carrying Varek across two bad breaks without making the boy feel carried. Selvek's teams shadowed them below, firing only when they saw a chance to force speed. That told Darian Selvek still wanted them alive enough to shape the story, but pressure from above was rising. The interval between pushes was shrinking. The hunt was getting less patient. At a narrow traverse under a leaning crystal rib, Mira froze and held a fist up. Dust fold, she whispered. Crosswind trap. Darien crouched and saw it, fine gray powder along the ledge edge lifting in loops and falling back on itself. Air was moving in opposite directions through the same gap, and one bad gust could take a body off the ledge. He anchored a line to a rusted ring bolt, tested it twice, then clipped each cadet through one at a time. Varric's hand shook so hard Darien had to steady the clasp himself. "Look at the line," Darien said. "Not the drop." Varric nodded too quickly. Darien corrected him, voice calm. "Listen to me. Do one thing, then the next." The boy blinked, then managed a breath that looked almost normal. When Kev came through last, a burst from below clipped rock over his head and showered everyone with grit. Kev did not flinch until he reached cover. Then he leaned his shoulder against the wall and hissed through his teeth. The numbed arm was failing. Izira saw it and moved beside him, wrapping his upper arm tighter with a compression strip. "We can rotate your load," Izira said. Kev glanced at Darien, then back to her. "If I lose the rear, they break." "You are not losing it," Izira said. "You are sharing it." Kev gave one grudging nod. Darien filed it away, because the group was changing under pressure in useful ways. They reached the outer ring of the ceremony platform as the light thinned into long shadows and the wind sharpened. The structure rose from a ridge like a broken crown, built of old stonework and antenna braces, with a broadcast dish mounted on a central spine and 4 observation alcoves facing different sectors of the training world. It had once been a place for proud demonstrations. Now it looked abandoned enough to hide truth or die in. Tolan ran a hand over a weathered panel plate. This place was used for live cohort assessments before they moved everything to Central Command. If the uplink bus is intact, we can push local feeds to the Academy Observer Archive. Observer Archive can be edited, Izira said. Not before buffering, Tolan said. The first burst tags every watcher on the list. Darien looked at Izira. That is all we need. They stripped loose rail sections and stacked them into low cover, keeping the dish spine between them and the lower ridge. Mira moved like she had been born reading stone, choosing positions that broke sight lines without trapping their own exits. Tolan found an old manual map sleeve under the operator station and used it to sketch platform angles and dust. Varric stayed by the cable spool with both hands wrapped around it, repeating connection points under his breath. Kev checked him once, then again, as if the boy's focus mattered as much as his own wounded shoulder. Darien kept his eyes on dish housing while his fingers worked through dead relays and frayed insulation. A warning tone pulsed from ridge speakers. Then Naira Kesh's voice came through, stripped of earlier warmth. All personnel in the ceremony sector are ordered to withdraw immediately. Weather instability is triggering a containment purge. Repeat, withdraw immediately. Tolan stared at the near speaker. There has never been a purge on an occupied ridge. Kev spat red dust. Then today is full of first times. Darien crossed to the platform control alcove and tore open the main access panel. The internals were old and simpler than modern encrypted boards, built to be repaired in the field by engineers who expected weather and war. Good. He could work with that. Mira and Varric hauled old power cells from storage niches while Izira and Kev blocked sightlines with loose plating and broken rail sections. Tolan dug through the operator station and found a physical archive routing key still wired into the console. Selvek's teams opened fire from the lower ridge within minutes. The first burst struck outer stone and antenna braces, probing defenses, and they were climbing undercover now. No more theater. Darien snapped cables into place, bypassed dead relays, and handspun the primary bus with a maintenance crank while Tolan fed route commands from memory. It should handshake with Academy Observer Network on old protocol, Tolan said. If they cut central routing, we can force sector witness mode. How many steps? Darien asked. Too many, Tolan said. Darien glanced at rising muzzle flashes and then at the old dish above them. Pick the 3 that matter. Tolan swallowed and cut his own process down. Power, dish alignment, archive burst. Good, Darien said. Izira ducked into the alcove as a round shattered stone behind her. Selvek is pushing left stair and east brace. 2 teams. Drones overhead. Darien handed her a flare cluster and pointed to crystal fins around the platform rim. Throw these at stagger heights when they crest. Make the echoes multiply. Izira understood and moved. Kev took Varek's hand, placed a compact signal spool in it, and pointed to the opposite alcove. You stay low, Kev said. If this line gets cut, reconnect exactly where Darien marks it. Varek looked terrified. Kev squeezed his shoulder once. This is not the hard job. The hard job is staying where you were told. Varek gave a ragged laugh. I could do that. Mira called from the roof ladder. Wind shift building. Fust. Darien looked up at the dish angle indicator. The old pointer vibrated as gusts changed, and he needed the dish locked before wind spiked or the burst would. Scatter. Tolan slammed the final route key, and the console coughed to life. Archive bus open for 1 channel. Darien inserted the wafer and the backup cartridge together, mirroring files across 2 lines in case one failed. He typed no long message, only the shortest tags needed to force eyes on a content. Quedete evaluation sector. Unauthorized live predator deployment. Command override chain attached. Observer liaison links attached. The first team reached the left stair. Izira threw the flares. White fire burst at 3 different heights across crystal fins. The platform filled with false sound. Every footstep and shout thrown sideways into 10 directions, and Selvek's advance line staggered and misfired at echoes. Darien drove the dish lock home. Tolan's voice tightened. Now! Darien hit the archive burst. The old dish groaned, turned against wind, and fired a narrow transmission into the dark. For one breath, nothing happened. Then the console screen filled with watcher acknowledgments as legacy observer nodes autologged the incoming file. Faculty boards, audit terminals, external liaison mirrors. Too many to clean fast. Tolan stared, stunned. It went through. Naira's voice cut over the speakers, no longer controlled. Terminate that platform link now. Selvek answered on a command channel loud enough to bleed through. Capture first. I need the cartridge. Darien heard the split and understood the weakness. To Darien, it sounded like Naira wanted the infrastructure erased, while Selvek still believed he could contain the evidence by grabbing it. The dish shuddered as a round struck the upper brace. Mira dropped from roof ladder, eyes wide. More teams climbing from the east. And there was something else. High-altitude engine signature. Darien looked up and saw a dim-moving light far above cloud haze. Orbital strike preparation. The cleanup order had started. Darien grabbed the cartridge copy and shoved the original wafer back into the console to keep the line occupied. We're not done, Darien said. If they call it a forged burst, we need witnesses alive on open channels. Izira met his eyes and nodded. Then we hold long enough to speak. The platform fight turned into a tight scramble of stone cover, flares, and bodies in warped crystal echoes. Darien stayed anchored to the console alcove, while Izira and Kev broke Selvek's push at the stair. Selvek himself came up with the next wave, moving like a man who believed pressure was a science. Selvek drove into the alcove gap, and Darien saw the opening when Selvek overcommit to the angle. Izira locked Selvek's shoulder and twisted it hard. Kev shoved Selvek into stone under the dish spine. Darien used the breath of space to rip the command unit from Selvek's chest rig and yank it under his own arm. He did not look for triumph. He looked for the next second. Kev pinned Selvek under the dish spine. Izira bound Selvek's wrist with a brace line and pulled it tight until Selvek stopped fighting and started breathing with anger instead. No cheers came. There was no room for them. Mira called down again, louder. Strike engine descending. It is real. Tolan looked at the console and went pale. Naira has sealed local route permissions. The only way to stop purge is command counter authorization or public lock from higher than range operations. Izira looked at Selvek on the ground and then at Darien. We already sent the files. Why are they still committing? Darien checked the console buffer and saw the answer in one incoming line mirrored from command traffic. Local contamination protocol remains active pending review. To Darien, it meant someone above Naira was buying time. If the strike hit before review nodes acted, the dead would carry the old story and the evidence would become argument. Darien looked at the dish, the sky, and the open archive channel. Then we do not wait for review, he said. We force a live witness line they cannot ignore. Tolan opened the legacy broadcast menu with blood on his sleeve and red dust in his hair. He found what he had hoped still existed. Ceremony witness mode. It had been designed for old field assessments, so board members could question cadets and commanders in real time from remote halls. Primitive by modern standards, hard to spoof, and harder to shut without leaving a visible cut on every observer terminal already connected. 3 channels only, Tolan said. 1 open mic. 2 visual feeds, if the roof camera still works. Darien did not need the visual. Open mic and command bleed. Tolan stared. You want their traffic on the same line? Yes, Darien said. Izira understood before he finished. If Naira or Vayer gives a purge order while cadets are speaking, the archive tags it against witness testimony. Darien nodded. Then cleanup becomes confession. Kev hauled Selvek against a pillar and tied him higher, keeping the commander upright enough to be heard. Selvek glared at all of them, breathing hard, shoulder locked, and command rig gone. Do you think the board saves you? Selvek asked. Darien looked at him once while checking dish power. I do not need the board to save us. I need them to hear you. Varek, still crouched by the cable spool, looked up. What do I do? Darien pointed to the dish relay. You keep that line alive if it drops. Same as before. Varek swallowed and nodded. Outside the alcove, wind began to rise in hard pulses, and the old platform groaned, and high above the strike engine glow brightened behind thin cloud. Mira dropped from the roof ladder. The roof camera is half dead, but I can aim it. We have maybe 2 minutes before the strike can fire if they keep lock. Tolan opened the witness channel. A chime sounded through the platform and out across every connected observer node, and then a thin voice came from the speaker, distorted by age but clear enough. Legacy witness mode active. Identify local field authority. Darien looked at Izira. She stepped into the alcove mic first, face streaked with dust, breathing hard but controlled. I am Cadet Izira Tal of Astravale War Academy, senior cohort. This range event was not a systems failure. Predator assets were deployed into a marked cadet route under command authority. Tolan patched command bleed in. The channel crackled as another voice pushed through. Terminate witness mode. This platform is under contamination lock. The witness line chimed. The command is logged. Contamination basis requested. Naira did not realize for one fatal second that her voice was now public to all connected observers. Contamination basis is unauthorized evidence fabrication by range infiltrator Darien Voss and hostile cadet collusion. Darien leaned into the mic. My name is Darien Voss. I am a contractor you flagged. I transmitted command logs showing Predator release authorization, route override changes, and observer liaison access tied to Regent Haldenver's office. Another chime sounded as more nodes connected. Faculty channels, audit channels, and one external board line marked priority. Selvek laughed once through blood and grit. You think names protect you. Another channel cut in, closer and tagged by the platform itself. The witness system chimed again, blunt and automatic. Commander Selvek. Drawn. Local field command. Selvek heard the tag, and his face changed, but it was too late. Izira turned toward him, then kept her voice on the mic, so the line carried both witness and target. You ordered cadets to remain in a kill corridor after live predators entered the route. Selvek's answer came from reflex and pride before caution could stop it. I ordered cadets to maintain route discipline under a compromise scenario. Disorder increased casualty probability. The witness line chimed. Commander drawn. Clarify Predator deployment authorization. Selvek looked at Darien, then at the sky, then at the old speaker that had become a tribunal. He chose loyalty to chain over self-preservation. Predator deployment was authorized under revised evaluation protocol. By whom? The witness line asked. Before Selvek could answer, Another channel cut in on a priority line, smoother and colder. Izira and Tolan recognized it immediately. This is Regent Halden Vare. This line is compromised by incomplete operational context. All participants are ordered to stand down pending formal review. To Darian, the timing sounded like a man trying to slow the room before it turned into a record. Darian motioned to Tolan to keep bleed open. Izira stepped closer to the mic. Regent Vare, did your observer liaison office receive live behavior scoring from this event before casualties were resolved? Silence. And then Vare, careful now. Cadet Tau, you are under stress and not qualified to interpret command oversight. Darian inserted the copied cartridge into the second port and opened the authorization fragment so the witness system's visual tag could capture the file header. He did not narrate long, but read the minimum. Observer access granted to Regent Liaison Office. Variable survival response mode. Cohort flagged routing. The witness line chimed, then another channel joined. The audit voice returned, older and clipped and very awake. This is Board Audit Central. Range operations and Regent Liaison are ordered to suspend all purge and containment actions pending immediate external audit. Naira's voice crashed into the line. Strike lock is already in progress. If I drop containment now, the sector destabilizes. Mira, watching the brace vibration and the wind, whispered to Darian. She is lying. The wind is bad, but not purge bad. Darian pressed the open mic key. Director Kesh, if the sector is unstable, why were enforcement teams pushed uphill toward occupied witness infrastructure after purge prep began? Naira did not answer. Above them, the strike engine tone shifted pitch. Tolan stared at the board line. The strike command is waiting on local confirmation. If she confirms, they fire before the audit lock reaches the orbital queue. Darian looked at surviving cable, the shaking dish braces, the cadets around him, and the single path left. He reached down and hauled Selvek upright by front armor, forcing the commander's face toward the open mic. You know her timeline, Darian said quietly. You know the strike sequence. If the platform dies with cadets on it, she calls it necessary, and you become field scapegoat. Selvek stared back, breathing hard, fury and calculation fighting in his face. Darian did not plead, and he did not threaten. He used the truth. They were always going to burn this range if control slipped. You felt at the moment your command tag stopped matching. A long second passed. Then Selvek looked at the speaker and spoke in a voice stripped of performance. Local purge request was submitted before platform witness mode activation and before final casualty verification. The witness line chimed and logged it. Naira's breath hissed over the channel. Commander Drawn, you are relieved. Selvek gave one broken smile with no humor in it. I noticed. Board Audit Central came back on, this time with authority that carried across every line at once. Orbital Q is ordered to abort strike lock. Repeat abort. Range operations is frozen. Regent liaison records are seized under emergency review. All cadets and field personnel in ceremony sector are now protected witnesses. For one heartbeat, nobody on the platform moved. Then the strike engine glow above shifted away and climbed. The lock had broken. Varric sagged where he crouched, still gripping the cable spool. Mira sat down hard on stone and laughed once in disbelief. Kev closed his eyes for a moment and leaned his forehead against the pillar, not only from weakness, but from relief finding him before he was ready. Izira looked at Darian as if checking he was real. Darian felt his hands shaking for the first time, a delayed spill of adrenaline he could not argue with. He was already moving again because surviving the strike did not end the danger. Keep the line open, he said. We are not finished until names and survivors are counted. Not long after the witness lock held, the platform began to change from a battleground into a site under protection. Early light reached the ceremony structure in thin bands of gold across red crystal and old stone, and an external audit shuttle arrived high overhead, broadcasting a neutral security code that neither Selvek's remaining teams nor Naira's range staff could override. The platform, which had nearly become a grave, became the center of a protected evidence node. Darian made himself stay until the count was done. Cadets present, identified, and alive. Iseratal. Kev Oren. Mirasen. Tolinruvai. Verigno. Additional survivors from scattered route sectors were found after the purge order was frozen and search teams no longer had to pretend they were enforcing discipline. Not everyone made it, and the losses were real, and names hit the group one by one as recovery updates came in. No one spoke much during those reports. Even Kev had no dry line for that. Director Nairakesh was taken into custody in range operations after trying, too late, to reconstruct command logs she should have erased hours earlier if she had been less certain of control. Darian watched the feed once, long enough to register the look on her face. It was not rage or grief. It was shock that the machine she built had turned and tagged her voice. Commander Selvek Drawn left the platform under guard, shoulder locked, command armor-scored and dusty, head up out of habit more than pride. He said nothing to the cadets, and he looked once at Darian and then away. Regent Haldenvare did not appear in person. His office channels went dark, then reopened under seizure seals. By midday, every academy node carried the same short bulletin. Liaison appointment suspended. Emergency review initiated. External oversight imposed on Astra Vale succession proceedings. It was bureaucratic language for collapse. Darian sat on the outer platform rail while med personnel checked Kev's shoulder and wrapped cuts on Mira and Varek. He let them look at a bruised rib and ignored pain when they pressed too hard because he had learned the difference between pain that mattered and pain that was only noise. Izira came to stand beside him, helmet clipped to her belt, hair full of crystal dust. They want witness statements in sequence, she said. They asked for you first. Darian looked out over Vargan Reach. In daylight, the red crystal canyon seemed almost unreal from this height, sharp light and long shadows, beautiful in the way dangerous places often were when viewed from far enough away. You should go first, Darian said. Cadet witness carries more weight on Academy review. She studied him for a second, then nodded. I thought you would say that. Darian glanced at her. Was that a test? It was a hope, Izira said. A small pause settled between them. Not awkward, just tired. Below, Varek was explaining to an audit tech for the third time how a signal spool had to be reconnected, getting more animated each pass. Kev, one arm numb and wrapped, corrected him from 2 meters away without lifting his head. Mira sat cross-legged on a crate, watching wind through platform braces like she still trusted dust more than voices. Tolan was already giving a formal statement with the expression of someone who had watched one life end and did not yet know what the next would be. Izira followed Darian's gaze. They're alive because you were here. No, Darian said. They're alive because they adapted before they were ready. She looked back at him, eyes tired and clear. You did too. Darian did not answer. A runner from the audit team approached, slowed when he reached Darian, and handed over a sealed field token. External review requests your credentials for verification and retention offers for advisory service. Darian turned the token once in his fingers and handed it back. Verification only. The runner blinked. No retention interview? No, Darian said. The boy nodded and hurried off, confused by someone refusing what most field contractors would fight years to receive. Izira watched him go. You really are leaving. Darian stood, tested the bruise in his side, and picked up what remained of his tool case. It was split, burned, and missing half its latches. That was always the plan, Darian said. She almost smiled. You do not sound like someone with plans. I sound like someone who has seen too many of other people's plans, Darian said. That earned a tired breath of laughter from her, quiet and real. An audit officer called for Cadet Tao at the witness station. Izira straightened automatically, then stopped and looked back at Darian one last time before stepping away. The vote is gone now, Izira said. The review will freeze everything. Darian shifted, the broken case in his hand. Good. Frozen systems crack slower. Gives people time to see where the seams are. Izira held his gaze and nodded. Then she went to give her statement, not as a survivor being managed, but as a witness who knew exactly what had been done and who had done it. Darian waited until she started speaking before he moved. He did not leave by shuttle with audit teams or by honored escort with academy staff suddenly eager to be seen near the right people. He walked down the old maintenance path on the backside of the ridge where wind was quieter and no one thought to stop a tired contractor carrying a ruined case. At the lower service pad, a cargo pilot he knew only by voice led him into the rear bay without questions and handed him a canteen. Rough shift. Darian took a drink and looked out at Vargan Reach one last time through the open ramp. The red crystal canyons caught morning light and threw it in false directions, still lying beautifully to anyone who listened the wrong way. Something like that, Darian said. The pilot nodded toward the broken case. You gonna fix that? Darian set the case on the deck, considered split hinges and scorched alloy, and gave a nearest thing to a smile he had managed since the first Predator hit Route 3. No, he said. I think I will keep it. The ramp closed. As the cargo lift rose into bright air over Vargan Reach, Academy channels were already replaying witness clips from the old ceremony platform. Names were being called, logs were being pulled, and the story they tried to write was collapsing. Darian leaned back against the bay wall and let engine vibration steady his breathing. He had done what he came to do. Get people out, keep one line open, and break the lie before it could finish the job. If this story stayed with you, if you felt the pressure, the silence, and the cost of every choice, let me know. Please like this video, share it with someone who loves science fiction, and subscribe to the channel for more long-form sci-fi stories told for listeners who want tension, heart, and worlds that feel real. Your support helps this channel keep building these stories, one signal at a time. And until the next transmission, stay sharp, stay curious, and keep listening.